When I think of Ligier, a few things come to mind. Pure French Alp goodness. We've got high altitudes and thin air, grassy ski hill runs, and steep as all get out chutes with more routes than you could shake a stick at. Of course, we can't forget those bike park features that would make any good bike handler quiver, with drops and gaps of the highest caliber just waiting to catch you off guard, especially after a grueling 3.5-minute technical downhill run. Not to mention the extremely hard-packed terrain between all those features that I just mentioned, full of loose marbles and on a really bad day, greasy, slippery bermed corners. Ligier has hosted many World Cup events over the years, and most notably the ones from 2019 onwards. Now, this legendary downhill course has something for every single rider to enjoy and excel at. So why is it that the French tend to dominate the most? I mean, are they really that good? I mean, it's not just me who's swooning over the male and female French elite winners on the World Cup circuit. The proof is in the pudding, or in our case, results and stats. Looking back at the last 5 years, there have been 3 World Cup races in Ligier and 1 World Champs race. And of those races, 62.5% of the winners were French, as well as about 35% of the overall podiums. Let's compare that to another World Cup track elsewhere in the world where the local racers tend to perform really well, and that is Fort William in the UK. Now, UK riders tend to be the favorites here because apparently they can ride the steep, wet, crazy stuff better than anybody else. But when we look at the stats from the past 3 races in the UK that took place in the past 5 years, only 33.3% of the winners were from the UK and 26.6% of the overall podium finishers. So when it comes to who's dominating which podium in which country, I still think the French are going to take this win. Home to the 2004 World Champs race, Ligier is situated in the Port du Soleil region of France, which is on the border of Switzerland, and the top of the chairlift is about 1,600 meters high, so the air is pretty thin. This area, known as Doors of the Sun, is located in one of the most congested ski destinations in the world. I mean, there are 13 major resorts prime for biking and skiing, and there's more terrain than you could possibly ever imagine riding in one lifetime. European and North American bike parks are just a little bit different. Now, where I live, we've got loads of bike parks from Whistler to Coast Gravity and Sun Peaks, but they're all spread out and they tend to operate on one individual mountain. Sure, there might be a couple of different chairlifts that you can access this mountain, but the trails are pretty condensed into one area. In Europe, the lift network is far more vast, so you might only ride a couple of trails on one particular mountain, but because you have access to so many more mountains, you're able to move about a lot more freely and cover a lot of terrain. This might sound small, but it means that people that ride and race in these areas like Ligier, Morzine, Morjan, La Plagne, and Champéry, they can ride a load of different trails all on the same day. While this isn't why the French are so darn good and fast, it does mean that they can get used to loads of different tracks and race venues, including the dirt conditions, without ever having to actually race there. Perhaps it's because they've been through a lot as a country since time immemorial, and the French patriotism runs deep, but damn are they a passionate bunch of people. I mean, who can forget the literal mobs of people rushing the finish corral last year in 2023 as Benoit Coulanges wrapped up the perfect weekend of racing, winning the qualifiers, the semis, and the finals. I was watching live on television and it was quite the spectacle to see, but I can only imagine what it felt like to be there in person. Talk about passion. A few gendarmerie scattered around the finish corral weren't going to do anything to stop that crazy French crowd. Now, there is certainly something to be said about competing on home soil and the extra energy that it gives you, whether you actually live near the venue or not. Screaming like hell and wielding chainsaws, showing up with the most elaborate signs and big energies to match. This is the stuff that's translated into the riders, and it's not replicable in any other space. It's also absolutely infectious, particularly if your national flag looks like this. I have to imagine another reason is because the French just like to go full gas. In the last 4 races in Ligier, there were 4 different male winners, and these guys have been competing against each other and pushing each other ever since they were Groms. Of the races I mentioned earlier, there were the Ligier World Cups in 2019, 21, and 23, as well as World Champs in 2022, and there were 5 different French winners. So it goes to show, it's not the same 1 or 2 dominant riders showing up and performing on the weekend. To try to make sense of this dominance, we reached out to Thibault Daprela, a French rider who's also a former Pinkbike racing member and rides World Cup races and hardline as well. And this is basically what he had to say. Because there's such a strong racing culture in France, it's as if the younger riders are really committed to racing instead of just getting sidetracked and slapping a couple bike park laps out with friends. I mean, obviously that happens as well, but when you consider the National Federation for Cycling in France also, we've got the younger generations being paired up with the older, more experienced riders, and then you've got events like team camps, which really help to elevate and build the youth from a really young age. Now, to make a little bit more sense of it all, let's look back at 5 of the best runs from Ligier in the past 5 years. First up, Amaury Pierron in 2019. He had a winning time of 2 minutes and 57 seconds. That was just over 2 seconds up on his closest competitor. Now that race was hectic. It was dry, it was loose. He had multiple 2-wheel drifts out on course, absolutely riding on rails, and he even had to pull a foot out a couple times just to save it. It was insane competitive riding from Amaury that day, and 2.3 seconds up on the rest of the field when everybody rode on the same good conditions, dry course. I mean, that is absolutely nothing to bat an eyelash at. I mean, I hate to think that that was him in his prime time, because right now he is also performing at the very highest level. Next up, Thibault Daprela winning in 2021 with a time of 3 minutes, 33 seconds, which was about 2.4 seconds up on his closest competitor. And it was a bit wet out that day. It wasn't pissing rain, but the conditions were super slippery. And not to mention, this was the week after Thibault had gotten airlifted off of a French course, nearly biting his tongue off, having a huge catastrophic explosion and crash out there. He was really gunning for the overall that year, so it's no doubt that was really what pushed him to show up and deliver on that day. And I have to imagine he was in so much pain, he just wanted that run over as quick as possible. In 2022, we saw Loic Bruni take the World Champs win with a time of 3 minutes and 20 seconds, which was just over 2 seconds up on his closest competitor. Now, he did start that race run a little bit slower, a little bit more conservative than we're used to, but by the second sector, he had built up a 2+ second gap. Now, not long before this race, he did have a huge crash in Mont Saint-Anne, so he was racing injured, but we know what sort of competitor Loic is, and he shows up and performs when it matters the most. Now, the course that year was extremely dry. It was covered in braking bumps and huge ruts, but typical Bruni fashion, he was strong, steady on the bike, smooth as butter, and came away with the win that year. Last year in 2023, we saw Marine Cabirou take the win in the women's field with a time of 3:47. That was nearly 4 seconds up on second place Monica Hrasnik. Now, the conditions out there were dry and dusty for everyone, and Marine rode extremely strong and smooth the entire time, taking her first win since 2020, and so you know she was stoked to take that first top step on the podium for the French crowd. And then last year, we saw Benoit Coulanges take his first win in elite downhill with a time of 3:19. That was only 0.16 of a second up from second place. He had the perfect weekend. He won qualifiers, semifinals, and finals, and it made the crowd go absolutely mental. I mean, Benoit Coulanges, I think most people will agree, he's the rider's rider. And so to see him take the win last year was absolutely astonishing. In 2022, we know that Loic was gunning for that world champs win, and Amaury Pierron was more focused in the overall points fight. This year, however, the tables have turned. There's Loic Bruni, who's now leading the overall points, and so obviously he's going to be focused on that. And Amaury Pierron, it's been said that he wants this world champs title. So what's going to happen? Is Amaury going to be taking it a little bit conservative this weekend, really holding off for world champs and just riding smooth and fun? Because if that's the case, we know that when you're French, fun is very, very fast. Marine Cabirou is also having a stellar season so far. She's sitting in third for the overall points. And so only time will tell who's going to take the win this weekend. Thanks so much for watching the Racing Rewind for Leger. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please subscribe to the channel.